In the evening of Saturday, October 24, 2009, 58 years old Christy Marks was making the 30-minute drive from the town of Medina, Ohio, where she owned a thriving home healthcare business, to her daughter Taylor's apartment in Akron. At the time, the 20 years old was living in the public housing project that her boyfriend Brian shared with his mom. She decided to move in with him a couple months prior after Christy, who didn't like Brian, had prohibited him from coming to their suburban home across town. Contrary to what Christy hoped, the move had only pushed Taylor further into his arms. The woman was saddened by it, but she decided to let her daughter choose for herself. However, a glimmer of hope appeared when Taylor called her mom and invited her over, saying she wanted to talk to her about possibly finding a job and moving to a better accommodation. It was about 8 p.m. when Christy finally pulled into the parking lot of the apartment complex. When she got out of the car, she saw Taylor walking towards her, accompanied by Brian and a friend of his. The two women hugged each other before heading towards the entrance to the building. They had only walked a few steps when they heard the sound of someone quickly approaching from behind. The four had barely enough time to turn to see who was running towards them before the person, a masked man, jumped on Christy, stabbing her with a knife, snatched her bag and took off running. Brian tried to grab the aggressor, but the man managed to cut him with the knife and flee the scene. Meanwhile, Christy had collapsed on the pavement, losing copious amounts of blood from multiple stab wounds. As soon as Taylor recovered from the initial shock of the aggression, she grabbed her phone and called 911, frantically screaming that her mom had just been stabbed and to send someone immediately. When first responders arrived at the apartment complex, Christy was barely alive, having sustained 16 stab wounds. The woman was rushed to the hospital, but by then she'd already lost too much blood and she sadly didn't make it. In the meantime, authorities had already begun collecting evidence, finding Christy's purse, which the aggressor had dropped not far from the crime scene, and the murder weapon in the bushes nearby. As for the witnesses, they were brought back to the station to be interviewed, including Brian's friend, Troy Purdy, who had already left the scene when the police showed up. When questioned by authorities, all three gave accounts that mirrored one another. However, it didn't take long before investigators started seeing red flags pop up in their stories. To them, it didn't make sense that a robber would target an older woman that wasn't alone but standing with three young people. In addition, although the aggression was described by the three witnesses as a robbery, police found that nothing of value was taken from the victim's bag, including money or car keys. Very soon, investigators shifted their focus to Taylor, Brian and Troy as their primary suspects. Starting to feel with her back against the wall, Taylor eventually confessed that there was no masked man and named Troy as her mother's killer, saying that the murder was motivated by the fact that her mother was a racist and Troy felt animosity towards her. She claimed that the man had been talking about doing it for a while. Not fully convinced by Taylor's confession, investigators brought Troy back for further questioning. After listening to Taylor's claims, he broke down and admitted to stabbing Christy, but said it had nothing to do with Taylor's racist theory. Plan was, I kill her, I get paid, Troy said in the interview, claiming he was to disappear from the picture for $5,000. The money was to be paid out by none other than Taylor Marks. According to him, Taylor expected to inherit a large amount of money from her mother's property and life insurance policy, after seeing her name on Christy's will. Following his confession, Troy was arrested on charges of murder. The same fate awaited Brian, whom, confronted with Troy's statement, also admitted to his role in the crime. Finally, investigators returned their attention to Taylor. She too finally confessed to being involved, although she continued to deny the claims that she offered to pay the man to kill her mother.
I wouldn't pay him to kill my mom. I love my mom.
In less than 4 hours, the three main suspects were behind bars in Summit County Jail. According to the police reconstruction, Taylor plotted to kill her mother so that she could inherit her money. Christy's will, written in 2004, named her daughter as the sole beneficiary of her personal property and life insurance proceeds. While investigators continued to try and build a case against the three suspects, a security guard came forward and provided authorities with a video that captured the murder. Despite the poor video quality, the video clearly showed Taylor passively standing by as Troy stabbed Christy to death. Confronted with the video, Taylor claimed she couldn't do anything as she was only 5'2" and 120 pounds, against two men twice her size and 3 times her body weight, but she was screaming at them to stop. After talking to the suspect's friends, authorities also learned that Taylor reached out to other acquaintances, hoping to get them to commit the crime. According to investigators, she offered her mother's house to a friend if he agreed to run Christie over with a van. Taylor, however, always denied these allegations. In the weeks leading up to the trial, as news outlets conducted interviews with friends and family of the victim, new details kept emerging about the relationship between Taylor and Christie. Taylor was adopted as an infant by Christie and Bruce Marks, a loving couple who couldn't conceive children of their own. And growing up, she enjoyed a privileged upper-middle-class lifestyle in northeastern Ohio. This picture-perfect life was shared in 2002, when her father died after succumbing to a diabetic coma, as Taylor was much closer to him than she was to her mother. Without Bruce to glue the family together, the relationship between Christie and her daughter grew more stressful, especially after Taylor's grades took a dive in high school, possibly due to her learning disability. Regardless, those close to the family described Christie as a wonderful mother, who lavished love and money on her daughter, despite the girl's tendency to get herself into trouble. As a testament to this, Taylor wrote on MySpace that her mom planned to hand her the home healthcare business after she graduated from college. Friends of the victim said they tried to warn Christie against giving her daughter so much credit and letting her get away with everything, but apparently the woman couldn't think the worst of her daughter. After graduating Copley High School in 2008, Taylor enrolled into the local University of Akron. However, once again, her grades suffered and she soon dropped out. According to her stepfather, she was a lost girl who didn't know what she wanted to do. About the relationship with her mother, Taylor would say that the woman utilized materialistic gestures to fill the voids in their life, and that they'd grown progressively more distant as Taylor had gotten older and started dating and making her own decisions, which Christie didn't like. Although her mother did give her emotional attention and wanted to spend time together, Taylor was never interested, as she described herself as a daddy's girl and said that when her father passed away in 2002, she was left with a void that no one could fill.
My mom did give me emotional attention. I just didn't want it. I wanted my dad. I was a daddy's little girl. He was my rock, and I wasn't having it.
Her grandfather passed only a few months later, leaving her without the two men in her life that understood her the best. Because Christie never took her to counseling, she was never able to fully process her father's death. This, coupled with the learning disability she had, made her extremely vulnerable and unable to stand up for herself. For this reason, she claimed it was easy to manipulate her into agreeing to the plot, but she didn't actually mean for her mother to be killed and didn't want it to happen. As to why she didn't try to help her mother as she was bleeding out on the pavement, Taylor explained she didn't because she didn't know the extent of the damage that had been done and was afraid of making things worse. At the trial, prosecutors left the choice between seeking the death penalty and allowing Taylor to plead out in the hands of Christie's relatives, who asked the state to show mercy. They didn't believe Christie would have wanted to see her daughter sentenced to death. "That's not mercy," Taylor said about the sentence. "No one deserves to spend the rest of their life in prison." Following her family's decision, Taylor pleaded guilty to aggravated murder and accepted a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The same applied to Brian and Troy. She was in tears as she stated, "My mom did not deserve the choices that I made. I should have listened to my mom because at the end of the day, regardless of what she had done to me, she did care. She did love me in her own way, and I realize that now." In a recent interview, Taylor still minimized her involvement in the homicide, claiming her boyfriend Brian was the mastermind. The plot had been set in motion after, in a couple occasions, her mother made her so mad that she jokingly wished death on her. Brian took it to heart, and it was him who wanted Christie's money, hoping he and Taylor could use it to live happily ever after. "My mom aggravated me and I said something I shouldn't have said, and Brian took it literally and ran with it." She claimed that when she called upon her mom to come pick her up, it was to tell her she decided to agree to her offer of an apartment, a car, and a job, and was ready to go home. She wanted out of the situation she was in. When she found out the two men were going to follow through with the plan, she tried to call Christie to let her know, but the woman didn't have her phone with her. She didn't want her mom to die, and she was everything she had left in the world, the only person who genuinely cared for her and would help her whenever she was in need. Taylor concluded the interview saying that, after many years in prison, she now is a completely different person, and hoping that, one day, she'll be released. This was the story of Taylor Marks. If you found it interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe, and leave a comment below if you have any opinion on the case or suggestion for future videos. And I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching.